Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this horror movie review for day 21 of my 31 Days of Halloween Horror series. So today we're going to take a look at a movie that's been a long time coming as far as a first time watch for me and review. That I absolutely wanted to watch with this series because it's a movie that's been out for a while and I've heard a lot about, including an amazing twist. And I got it about a year ago for whatever reason, just haven't had a chance to watch it yet. I kind of forgot about it actually, but I was excited to include it in that series or in this series. And that is from 2009, the movie Orphan. So yeah, Orphan from 2009 that I have on Blu-ray here. Um, so yeah, let's just go ahead and get into it. So Orphan is a 2009 psychological horror thriller film directed by Yami Cole Serra and written by David Leslie Johnson from a story by Alex Mays. The plot centers around a couple who, after the death of their unborn child, adopts a psychopathic 9-year-old girl with a mysterious past. So basically, the film opens with Kate and John Coleman's marriage being strained after the stillbirth of their third child, Jessica, whose loss is particularly hard on Kate, who is also a recovering alcoholic. She and John decide to adopt 9-year-old Russian girl Esther, Esther. I don't know why. From St. Marina's home for girls, a local orphanage. St. Mariana's home for girls. Their 5-year-old deaf girl, Max, embraces Esther, but their 12-year-old son, Daniel, is less welcoming. One night, Kate and John begin to have sex until Esther interrupts them. Kate becomes suspicious when Esther expresses far more knowledge of sex than expected of a child of her age. Esther then exhibits hostile behavior in front of Max and Daniel, such as killing an injured pigeon and badly injuring a classmate who was bullying her. Sister Abigail, the head of the orphanage, visits the household, warning Kate and John that tragic events and incidents occur around Esther, including the house fire that killed her last adoptive family. When Sister Abigail leaves, Esther causes her to crash her car on the road and then bludgeons her to death with a hammer. She forces Max to help her move the body and then hides the evidence in Daniel's treehouse. Daniel sees them at the treehouse, and later that night she interrogates him about what he saw, threatening to castrate him if she tells Kate and John. So that's the setup and the premise for Orphan. As far as the cast goes, we have the wonderful Vera Farmiga as Catherine Kate Coleman, Peter Sarsgaard as John Coleman, Isabelle Fuhrman as Esther, CCH Pounder as Sister Abigail, Jimmy Bennett as Daniel Coleman, and Ariana Engineer as Maxine Max Coleman. So yeah, that's the setup, the premise, and the cast for Orphan. So as I said, this is a film that I kind of had an idea what it was about, evil child film, which, to be honest with you, isn't my favorite subgenre of horror. Maybe that's why I put it off as long as I did without seeing this film. But it's kind of gotten more of a cult following and more talked about, I feel like, over the last 5 to 6 years than it did initially when it came out. Um, but yeah, this is a film that I've been kind of anxious to watch and a little bit nervous too because expectations and all that. You know, people talk about this movie and the great twist that it has. So I was worried that it was going to kind of let me down. And I have to say, after watching it, it did not let me down, not at all. So yeah, just getting into my review for for Orphan from 2009. Um, First thing about it is I love the way the movie sort of sets the viewer up with starting in such a way with some predictable evil child cliches that we kind of expect and are predictable, and thinking the movie's going to head in a certain direction, and then the movie subverts those expectations and goes somewhere else. It was the way they did it was just very clever, very effective in terms of its setup, but more importantly, its delivery of subverting those expectations. It really worked for me. It made this movie stand out compared to other evil children movies, horror movies that are out there. So, yeah, that was the number one thing that really came across. It really does have a fantastic jaw dropping twist. One of the best, I would say, to any horror movie that I've ever seen. Now, part of that, I have to say, from a personal standpoint, somehow I think the most remarkable thing, aside from this movie, is the fact that the twist was never spoiled for me. especially with all the internet hype and spoilers that happen, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook or anywhere else on the internet. The fact that I didn't have this twist spoiled for me after 13 years of this movie being out, I think that's the most remarkable thing about this movie. So I got to watch the movie without knowing exactly what the big twist reveal was. And yeah, it was just brilliant. I did have my jaw on the floor when it was revealed to me going into the third and final act. Um, I absolutely didn't see it coming. Of course, I was trying to figure out as the movie was going on what the twist could be, and I never really approached what I never came close to what it actually ended up being because my mind just doesn't go there. I don't think most people's mind does the first time they watch this movie. So obviously, I knew there was something wrong with this child, and so I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's her past? You know, where is this going? What happened to her, kind of thing. And yeah, just never saw that twist coming. So that was very effective. And it wasn't a cheap or tacked on twist like you often get in movies, especially horror movies, where sometimes they just throw something at you just for the sake of having a twist. This movie didn't do that at all. I mean, in fact, when I go back and think about certain parts of the movie, it makes a lot of sense. It works within the context of this movie. They just set it up so brilliantly that you're not thinking along those terms. At least I wasn't as you're watching it. So yeah, just fantastic twists that really works brilliantly. Um, then of course you got to talk about the performances, and I'm going to talk about two specifically. Well, I thought the overall cast was pretty good for the most part. There's two characters, two actresses that stand out the most in this movie. The first one, of course, being one of my favorite actresses today, and that's Vera Farmiga. Of course, most people are going to know her from the Conjuring movies, also from Bates Motel as the mother in that fantastic series. But she's wonderful in this movie. You know, she's a character that has a lot of layers to her. She's had a lot of trauma. She has a lot of history. That character was really set up well, from alcoholism to the trauma of losing a child to the trauma of almost losing another child because of her alcoholism. There's just a lot of layers to that character. And you know, some people might think that she's a little bit over the top with her emotions, but really, I don't think she is. If you think about everything she's been through, especially what they set up at the very beginning of this movie with the stillbirth of their third child and everything she goes through with that, she just portrays this character wonderfully. And of course, she's the character as the audience that we're rooting for, of course. And you can kind of understand why other people in the movie are thinking that maybe she's nuts and, you know, basically blaming everything on this young 9-year-old girl. But of course, we know that she's right in her fears and her anger directed at this girl, but it's also easy to see from the standpoint of the other characters in the movie why they kind of feel like she's lost her mind a little bit. So, yeah, I just love Vera Farmiga. Like I said, one of my favorite actresses. She's just a delight to watch in anything that she is. And then, of course, the other character you have to talk about in this movie is Esther herself, played by Isabelle Fuhrman. One of the reasons that I'm not a huge fan of the subgenre of evil children movies is because a lot of times the performances by the children don't work for me. You can tell that they're trying to act, they're trying to be a certain way, and it just doesn't work for me. There's a few exceptions. There has been really good children or kid actors or actresses in movies, but I pretty much can count them on one hand. You know, Linda Blair from The Exorcist comes to mind. Um, I would say Danielle Harris from the Halloween movies 4 and 5 that she's in most notably. Um, Miko Hughes to a lesser extent in Pet Cemetery, although he wasn't really the focus of that movie like these other ones I mentioned. And even Macaulay Culkin in The Good Son is pretty good. And then also Haley Joel Osment from, of course, The Sixth Sense. So that's four right there. Now it's five with Isabelle Fuhrman. Yeah, her performance in this makes me actually want to watch more evil children horror movies because she knocks it out of the park. It's hard to believe actually that I believe she was really 11 or 12 when she did this movie. She plays 9 very seamlessly, and but she just knocks out of the park. I mean, this with her expressions and just her Russian accent and everything she does with this character, her mannerisms, her actions. I mean, she sells it like very few children or kid actors that I've ever seen, especially in horror movies. It's really one of the great kid performances in horror movies, child actors performances, actresses performances. She's also a very layered character, and of course, the big twist, which I'm not going to give away here, kind of reveals that as well. Why she knows as much as she does about more adult kind of subjects, but yeah, she's just really good in this movie. She really sells it. And if you don't have a child actor that can really sell the evilness of a child, it's just not going to work, and it's going to fall flat on its face. Fortunately for Orphan, they do have that child actor with Isabelle Fuhrman. Her and Vera Farmiga are the two actresses that really carry this movie to the finish line, and both do a wonderful job. So that just has to be said. Moving on to some other pros, I thought they did a really good job of setting up this family, the characters overall, um, the story, the groundwork that's set for this family. Um, it's not that pie in the sky sort of family that we're often introduced, and even in these family sort of horror movies, this family has a lot of problems. They have a lot of baggage, a lot of trauma in their background, and themes. This movie really explores themes of grief, and they use these characters to really introduce flawed characters, a flawed family. It's very believable because of that, though, and these are layered characters with a lot of backstory and development early on in the movie and throughout the movie that really make it for a much more compelling horror movie and even somewhat family drama than you'd otherwise get if it wasn't as well written and set up as it was. So that's something that really stood out to me. There are quite a few scenes of effective scenes of and moments of tension and suspense within the movie that really work without just being straight up jump scares. They do have a few jump scares and false scares, but not none that really stand out to me, which really does speak to the fact that they really set it up well. There's really a sense of eeriness and dread in this movie, especially as we get into the second act and obviously the third act as well, which the third act was really well delivered for having such a great setup. You're always worried that they're going to let you down in the end, but they really don't in this movie. It's very effective, very good tension and suspense all the way through, really. Um, was pleasantly surprised also, and this is another big thing that stood out to me. How I was surprised with how far this movie goes without holding back in regards to the violent kills that we get, the blood, and just the overall subject matter. Sometimes you get a movie like this with a 11 or 12-year-old who's the evil antagonist in the movie. You think it's going to be more just flirting with that PG-13, and it really doesn't. I mean, they really go for it, not just in terms of the subject matter and the imagery that they show, to the kills, which are very violent and brutal by a kid, by an 11, 12-year old girl. And there is some blood as well. So they really hold nothing back in this movie, despite the fact that their main villain and one of their main characters is a kid. I really appreciated that, and it was very impressive that they didn't hold back. But yeah, very much appreciated that. That really stood out compared to other kid films. And then I really enjoyed the score and the music within this movie as well. It's a very edgy thriller kind of musical score that adds to the tension and the dread. Um, if I haven't said it enough, it's a very well written and well directed movie. And then I didn't write it down in my notes, but I also have to mention I really love the setting and the atmosphere of it being set in the winter in this house kind of out in the middle of the woods. And you got a lot of snowfall in the movie, you got a lot of thunder. It's just got that great sort of horror thriller atmosphere there and I love the snow. That's one of my favorite things about the setting of the movie. So yeah, if that's not enough pros for you, I'm sure I could come up with more, but we'll leave it at that for now. As far as cons go for this movie, I really only have one big one, and other people have mentioned this in their reviews I see, and it's warranted, and that's the father character of John. He's a little too oblivious to what's going on, to things right in front of him. Definitely not a very supportive husband or even father to his real two children, I would say. He basically takes the word over an adoptive 9-year old girl that he's known for a few months over the word of his wife, who he's been through hell and back with the trauma and everything else. And even his two kids, like his son, his 12-year-old son, who he basically ignores some of the warnings he's been giving him. That kind of bogs me because it's that cliche that we get where one of the spouses, one of the parents in these movies are completely blind morons to make the plot work, basically. And that's one trope that this movie uses that I really just can't stand. And it's definitely the biggest con in this movie. To a certain extent, earlier on in the movie, you can understand why he might question his wife a little bit more because of where they've come from as a couple, where she's come from with her alcoholism and stuff. But it just gets a little bit too much, a little too frustrating to watch that character towards the middle part of the movie and into the third act until he has no choice but to face it, um, for his own well-being, basically. But yeah, that's one thing that really stood out in a negative way. Just becomes an unlikable character and really frustrating to watch. Also, this is probably more of a personal thing, but the son of Daniel, who I don't really think was all that well acted either by Jimmy Bennett. I think he's one of the actors or actresses in this movie that's not great compared to the others. He's kind of one of the more insufferable kid characters, especially in the first part of this movie, the part of the movie with the dinner scene where he just totally disrespects his parents, tells them to basically F themselves. The whole dinner scene, as I said, I just wanted to slap the hell out of him. And again, I understand he was probably supposed to be that way to a certain extent, but I couldn't stand that character. I would just, being a parent myself of a son, I would just like to. But that's really all I've got for cons, to be honest with you. Otherwise, everything about this movie worked for me, from the setup to the twist to the overall story to the two main lead characters, two actresses that I mentioned, the setting, the tension and suspense, and the fact that they really went for this. They really went for the R rating that they got for this evil kid horror movie. So you don't often see that. So yeah, I'm going to give this movie a 9 out of 10. This is a fantastic 2000s um, evil kid movie, but just really one of the better psychological horror movies in the last 20 years for sure. And I'm going to give Orphan a 9 out of 10. So go ahead and comment down below what you guys think of the original Orphan from 2009. Did you like it more or less, the same as I do? Why not? Comment down below. Please be sure to like this video and hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my upcoming reviews for this series. And please be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my great horror content coming up throughout the rest of this year and into next. So, hope you enjoyed this horror movie review for day 21 of my 31 Days of Halloween horror series. Hope you're having a great October and stay scared. Bye.